finishing moves are the hype to every show or game, and of course Pokemon is no different. From Entei's final move of Eruption to represent how it causes volcanoes to erupt with its cries. Wailord's Water Spout doing massive damage and doubling as when you'd see a whale surface from deep below the ocean. Houndoom literally being called Helgar in Japanese and having Inferno, which is actually called Purgatory. And of course even signature moves like Jirachi's Doomed Desire, a final wish causing massive destruction in its wake. With Kukui's research on Pokemon from Generation 2 and 3 now complete, I can now bring to you more hidden lore of Pokemon final moves. Howdy there, I'm Krillix, connecting our world through Pokemon, and if you haven't seen the first video, don't worry, I have you covered. Just like last time, we'll be moving fairly fast through these Pokemon, talking about final moves that they learn through level up, their signature move if they have one, or any real standout moves, as they often represent info from the Pokédex, lore, behavior of the Pokemon, or real-life connections to animals or events. I will primarily be using move lists from the most recent game a Pokemon is in, if you wanted to look anything up. I will also use Legends games on special cases like our starters because we do get different info or stories that they try to tell us. Lastly, if I just say the final evolution of a Pokemon, then the info applies to the entire line. It's really surprising overall, but how about we get started right away? We're starting out strong with one of the mascots of this channel and the final evolution of my first ever starter, Meganium, which technically Chikorita is one of the mascots, not Meganium. It closes out with Solar Beam in the main games, but Leaf Storm in Legends ZA. Leaf Storm is really there to just give it more power, while even when we look at its new Mega info, we get to see that Solar Beam is its own quote-unquote signature move. Of course, this signature isn't exclusive, but we get the following info. Mega Meganium can detect changes in the weather with its feelers, allowing it to seek out places where it can photosynthesize more efficiently. Accordingly, its 4 flowers store up massive amounts of solar energy, producing a fragrant substance that, depending on the dosage inhaled, can either calm down or cause agitation on those who smell it. The accumulated solar power also allows Mega Meganium to unleash powerful solar beams instantly from its 4 flowers, a move also known as Mega Soul Cannon. And we didn't know what this was until Pokemon Champions came out, and it turns out that instead of a literal move, Mega Soul Cannon is rather a signature ability of the giant baby flower dinosaur. Mega Soul itself actually causes all moves used by the Pokemon with this ability to behave as though the weather were harsh sunlight, regardless of the actual weather on the field, which is wild. Normally I wouldn't go through all the mechanics, but this is so new that we kind of need to, and I was interested in it. This means, though, that when used by Pokemon with Mega Soul, Solar Beam and Solar Blade are executed in a single turn, instead of requiring a turn to charge. Weather Ball is a Fire-type move with a base power of 100. Synthesis, Moonlight, and Morning Sun restore 2/3 of the Pokemon's maximum HP. Thunder and Hurricane have their accuracy reduced to 50%. All Fire-type moves used by the Pokemon have their power increased by 50%, and all Water-type moves have their power decreased by 50%. Because Mega Soul does not alter the weather itself, it is unaffected by the weather negating effect of Cloud 9. It also bypasses the special defense boost granted to Rock-type Pokemon during Sandstorm, and the defense boost granted to Ice-type Pokemon during Snow. Additionally, Solar Beam and Solar Blade do not have their power halved under Rain, Snow, or Sandstorm when used by a Pokemon with Mega Soul. If a Pokemon with this ability uses Growth and Harsh Sunlight isn't already on the field, the move won't have any effect. This is insane power, and it perfectly represents Meganium through and through, absorbing tons of sunlight as it uses those feelers to find the perfect conditions that it needs to unleash this power. So you've heard the intro and you know Entei has Eruption as a final move, but to no surprise, the fire Pokemon that also represents volcanoes, as they are both literally called the Volcano Pokemon and have Eruption as their final moves, also includes Typhlosion. More than this, Typhlosion is noted to be incredibly powerful when it enters a rage, becoming so hot that anything it touches will instantly go up in flames. And as if that weren't enough, all it has to do is rub its fur together to create explosions. Something Bakugo's signature Pokemon joke enter here. Now, while that's a simple answer, we do have its Hisuian form, which has its own signature move, known as Infernal Parade. A move representing the 108 ghost flames that it can release from the orbs on its neck in the form of ferocious beasts. These flames will then reduce the opponent to nothing, not even ash and dust. This regional form is representative of its into nature with Mount Coronet, something that is releasing great spiritual energy. And we could take this one of two ways, I realized recently. On one hand, mountains are often considered sacred, places where the gods, or rather the kami, may convene, or at least where we as mortals are closest to space and ergo the heavens, which is something that would then tie into the spiritual nature. When we look at its likely inspiration, Mount Asahi, which is the tallest mountain in the Japanese island of Hokkaido, which, of course, Sinnoh is based on, then we get to see easily that the native Ainu people would call it Kamui Mintara, otherwise known as God's Playground. And if that isn't the tightest shit for a name, I don't know what is. It just sounds dope. Every time we've seen Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina on the mountain, how Arceus opens up its stairway to heaven at the top, everything makes perfect sense with calling it God's Playground or being based on God's Playground. And so, the other way we can look at it is that since this is the playground, these souls that rise up through the mountain to the afterlife is what Typhlosion in these areas became sensitive to, and why it is able to call upon them. It is one with the mountain, as the mountain is but a dormant volcano. More accurately, it's a stratovolcano, to be entirely fair, at the very least. So, a lot of fun ties that we see with its Hisuian form, and we can see that even in later games, they get stronger ties and stories to their signature moves or final moves overall. This isn't just something that existed randomly later on and they forgot, but rather something they keep adding in throughout the generations. Now, Feraligatr is a little left out in its deeper lore for Pokemon, as it instead takes its final move inspirations from real-life crocodiles. Its last four moves are Thrash, Aqua Tail, Super Power, and Hydro Pump. Which is all horrifying because this is just Feraligatr performing a fast approach and death roll on an opponent in the water before potentially drowning them. I'll be honest, Hydro Pump is a bit of an outlier, and that's the only way I feel it fits into this narrative. But in all seriousness, I figured this out by starting with Aqua Tail, tying it to how important alligator tails actually are. Their tails are the primary engine for their ability to swim, a weapon for defense, and a place for them to store their fat, which helps during times of food scarcity. After all, these tails make up nearly half of their total body length, so we should not be surprised at all that it would be so incredibly important. More than this, as we get into Thrash and Superpower, this really is the famed death roll of the alligator or even crocodile. An alligator's death roll is a violent, high-speed, 360-degree spinning maneuver used to subdue, drown, or dismember prey by exploiting rotational forces. The tactic is common among almost all crocodilian species, acting as a living, quote-unquote, knife to rip flesh. It often occurs in water to drown prey, but it can be used on land during territorial or feeding struggles. And it's of course doing this while still holding on tight with nearly 3,000 pounds per square inch of bone-crushing force that has been equated to the feeling of a small truck sitting on you. But it doesn't stop there, because I can't ignore its new signature move, Dragon Eyes, which transforms all normal type moves into dragon moves and boosts their power by 20%. Once again, absolutely wild, but as I've claimed in many videos before this was revealed, this line of Pokemon represents the ancient lineage of crocodiles and alligators, which is why even Croconaw looks like a caveman. They're one of nature's perfect creatures, having hardly changed comparatively to others despite millions of years of time, and it's glorious. For its triplet finale is Baton Pass, Double Edge, Hyper Voice. Baton Pass is just a way to show that it is lithe enough to not only get away through any narrow spaces that might be in the area, such as its own den, but also trade places with its children, which they are very protective over. Double Edge is also not much to write home about. As we've talked about in the first video, this move is actually called Life-Risking Tackle, and I've noticed it in Kangaskhan and Marowak, two other Pokemon commonly portrayed as being very protective and close to their children. So we're starting to see a strong pattern here. Finally, there's Hyper Voice. Mind you, its base attack is 76, while its base special attack is 45, significantly lower for Ferret. So this move is definitely more thematic in utility than it is for power, with ferrets in the real world being fairly silent or very vocal. The most common sounds that ferrets are known for is their duking sound, a sort of chuckling sound as it's described. Bark is to a dog as duke is to a ferret. Think of it that way. Duking is far from a ferret's only vocalization though. They have a repertoire of sounds that they use in conjunction with body language to communicate. So these living slinkies will hiss, honk, huff, laugh, and then even deaf ferrets will squeak, which are noted to be socially inappropriate by other ferret standards, which is funny. I just imagine a bunch of ferrets in top hats and holding their canes as they're sitting at a nice dinner, and one of them just starts squeaking, and they all just drop their wine glasses. Now, squeaking could be a squeak, it could be a scream, and occurs most often when playing. And then add on that deaf ferrets are even more vocal. But if we wanted to tie this to wild critters like the black-footed ferret, then of course they use their own chatter as an incredibly loud alarm for its kin in the face of danger, so it all comes together as to why this Pokemon has hyper voice. Moonblast, Hypnosis, Dream Eater, a creature of the night, Noctowl is, hence the Noct in its name, which means night. So there isn't really too much to say here. It's just an owl Pokemon hyper specialized for the night, as most owls in the real world are, all while still representing a grandfather clock thanks to Hoot Hoot's behavior. I tried looking into a connection between Japanese culture, dreams, and owls, but nothing. Nothing direct that would line up with Noctowl here, so nothing extra to report. Ledian is a bit of a toss-up as it ends with Bug Buzz, Air Slash, and Double Edge. Not a lot to talk on there, and the only thing I can say is that since Ledian is noted to be weak in the Pokédex, and Ladybugs seem to die at the casual breath of wind, Double Edge, or again, life-risking Tackle, might just represent it slamming into you and barely surviving, as I would expect of a real Ladybug trying to fight anything. Although Ladybug is at least noted to be social, so it would make sense that Ledian would be social as well, then becoming a parental protective figure for Ladybug, and following that trope we're running into with parents protecting their young. Gyarados surprisingly had Spiderweb as its signature move until Generation 5, and I wonder why that could be. Totally isn't because it's a spider, which by the standards of how we identify arachnids, it actually is not an arachnid, despite my sarcasm, because it doesn't even have 8 legs. Most of the arachnid Pokemon aren't even real spiders, which is wild, but that's besides the point. Eventually, they would gain the move Toxic Thread, which is now its new signature move that poisons the target and lowers their speed. I'm again genuinely surprised because this changes how we can see the method of hunting for these Pokemon. Spinarak is noted to have poison, but it's too weak to put an end to prey, so it just weakens it and then attacks. Meanwhile, it always seemed like Gyarados was strong enough as is, but for them both to not only spin webs, but even create poisonous threads as a note, could mean that any creature could accidentally walk through what seems like a normal spider web and end up weakened. All while this web signals to Spinarak and Ariados, whatever, that they have a new, slowly weakening target to keep their eyes out for and turn into prey. Now, I will note there are Pokemon like Crobat, which I already covered, because as I work through the Pokédex, I'm covering all forms and evolutions along the way, just to make life easier on me, to make sure I don't miss anyone, but somehow, because of my own editing error or something, I must have completely deleted Charizard or whatever, so now we're gonna have to talk about it in this video nice and short. For the Charmander line in general, the final move they all learn is Flare Blitz, a move that perfectly encapsulates the power of this Pokemon as it covers itself in a fiery cloak and crashes into its enemy at full force. In doing so, while very powerful, it also hurts these Pokemon. We see this time and time again in the anime or within the movies, but this is also one of the moves that it uses within Smash Ultimate. It's almost like, actually I think it uses it for more than just Smash Ultimate, but that's neither here nor there. It's almost like a torpedo in its own right with a double-edged sword of destructive power. Flail, Takedown, Hydro Pump, classics for our fish Pokemon as we look at Lantern, also closing out with these. But something else caught my eye is that on evolution, it gets Stockpile, Swallow, and Spit Up, which again stands out a lot to me. As it turns out, anglerfish in the real world are a bit wild, because according to multiple sources, anglerfish are able to use their expandable stomachs to hold food in their stomach as much as twice the size of their own bodies, which at first makes 0 sense, and made 0 sense to me mentally, but after digging just a little bit further, it turns out that they have flexible bones and expandable jaws to make this possible. So Lantern having this ability, or rather this move set, makes perfect sense and is a little bit scary because they're not small in the slightest. It's time for one of my all-time favorite lines of Pokemon, the Togepi line. Now, Togepi and Togetic are Pokemon of peace, good luck, and will grow to bring about good blessings of all kinds in the form of Togekiss. Togepi is meant to be a seed of hope that grants happiness to others, but when it is treated kindly and given plenty of love and appreciation, it will grow into Togetic, who in turn provides even more joy to others. They both close out with Wish as their final move, wishing for a peaceful and bountiful world, all while they disappear into Togepi Paradise, a dimension of their own where they all come from according to the anime at least. One day they will return in the form of Togekiss, assuming that their wish comes true and the world truly is at peace, which they often appear after the climax of the games, appearing in routes in which we would then be able to access. But with Togekiss, it's surprising because all moves it learns are at level 1 except Air Slash, a move it gets on evolution. This move already has a 30% chance to cause flinching. Add in Serene Grace, which Togekiss can have as one of its abilities, bringing that 30% chance to a 60% chance. This ability is directly translated from Japanese as Heavenly Blessing, so with this or Super Luck, it all ties back to luck, blessings, and happiness. Well, as long as you aren't on the receiving end of Togekiss's ire. Xatu closes with Future Sight like many psychic Pokemon do, though this is very fitting since so many decks entries state how it can not only see into the future, but also see into the past, all while it watches the sun all day, which, dude, you have to stop staring at the sun, you're going to burn out your retinas. Actually, as a side, I had someone try proving the sun wasn't real to me in person, because they said if you stare at it with your eyes, well, no duh, but if you stare at it, your eyes will hurt. And if you stare at a lamp, your eyes hurt. But if you stare at fire, you're fine. And I had never wanted a Dusk Noir to take my soul away so badly before. The person who told me this was also the one who was working on my tattoo, and they did a great job. But I had to play along, or else I imagined he would just purposely mess up the whole thing. He was a full-on tried and true conspiracy theorist on everything you could imagine, and it was painful for me, but let's move on. Ampharos only makes proper sense when you look at the line as a whole and the following 5 moves. It learns Thunder Punch on evolution, so no shocker there, as it stands on 2 legs now and really wants to make use of those hand nubs. The final 4 moves are Cotton Guard, which lines up with the previous 2 forms, having really soft, fluffy, shiny cotton, and Mega Ampharos turning into a representative for L'Oreal, which you could even tie in with Dazzling Gleam. Lastly, Light Screen and Thunder is just another easy tie to electricity and light overall, especially as we have the iconic Ampharos in Olivine Lighthouse that we had to bring back to health. Starting with Azumarill, it finishes with Bounce because that is one of the ways that it tends to get around. It moves quickly on land by doing this, but it does have another more reckless way of getting around. Azumarill spins its tail as if it were a lasso, then hurls it far. The momentum of the throw sends its body flying too. Using this unique action, one of these Pokemon managed to hurl itself a record 33 feet. It's like a shot putter in my eyes, and as it evolves, it will close with Superpower. Marill and Azumarill both tend to spend most of their day as well in the water no matter how fast the water does rush, while their fur helps make them apparently swim easier as the fur is hydrophobic. Despite this, they're still spending a lot of time dealing with the force of a moving river and are going to get muscled up in the process, thus explaining Superpower. Bonsly and Sudowoodo are a little lackluster in their final moves. Instead, we look at Bonsly's first 2 moves and Sudowoodo's original signature move to see how this all comes together. Bonsly at level 1 will have Fake Tears and Copycat. Beautiful reference in that Bonsly have to sweat in the way that looks like tears to get rid of excess moisture in their bodies, thus giving us fake tears. Meanwhile, Copycat is here because it will grow up learning to mimic the shrubs and trees around it so it can blend in with its environment, something that it gets better at doing in the form of Sudowoodo, who again had Mimic as its signature move. It mimics trees, pretty clear, case in point. All while being representative of Petrified Wood, which I always love to show off a little bit in videos whenever I talk about this Pokemon because 1, I love Petrified Wood, and 2, Sudowoodo is one of the primary reasons I got it. The S-U-D-O for Pseudo in Sudowoodo's name is said the same way as Pseudo, P-S-E-U-D-O, which denotes fake, as we would see in pseudoscience, for example. So, fake wood, fake science, there we go. I also have this little mini Sudowoodo charm from a con where a very, very kind, sweet artist had it at her stand, and she gave me a free sticker for sharing Sudowoodo facts, and I couldn't just let her give me something for free, so I bought, this, and it's just another cute little story that I love to share. But before we do continue, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe because there's hours upon hours of deep dive content to enjoy on this channel. This one is a little bit faster paced than usual, while others really dig into the details. In addition, what's your favorite Pokemon move? It doesn't need to be the strongest or the coolest, though I personally do love Tinkaton's Gigaton Hammer or Jirachi's Doom Desire. One is ridiculously funny because you're just hitting someone with a Gigaton Hammer, while the other is a bit more horrifying, and we'll get to that Doom Desire later. In addition, like the video if you want the next part to this one sooner, because I'm going through Gen 2 and 3 this time with more to come in the future, and by liking the video, it lets me know you want more videos on this sooner. Lastly, thank you to members of the channel. If you want early access to videos, monthly insiders, and members exclusive videos, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a massive difference as I am a one-man band on this channel, and you get some extra goodies out of it. But enough of all that. Thank you again for watching, and on with the video. In the saddest turn of events that should not have made me laugh, the entire Jumpluff line ends in Memento. In fact, it has Cotton Spore, U-Turn, Giga Drain, Bounce, and Memento. All moves showing how they spread their pollen and spores all over the place, how they control their movements in the air, how they absorb light and nutrients throughout all this time, and then die. I've grown a bit of a soft spot for this cat dandelion because, as the Pokedex makes clear in the most recent entries, once its cotton spores run out, its journey ends, as does its life. Meaning, of course, that the line grows as any dandelion would, serves its purpose, and passes away. A memento of their life being all the spores that have now scattered all over the world and will eventually grow into new Hoppip to repeat the cycle of life. Also, how could a trio named Hop, Skip, and Jump not have the move Bounce in their move list? Gotta include that fun little joke in the melancholic tale of life, after all. Ambipom is meant to represent the typical monkey mindset stereotype with its last moves, while also lining up attacks that hit multiple times thanks to its two tails. Double hit for the tails, fling because monkeys throwing things like banana peels, nasty plot because they're mischievous little guys, but it ends on last resort, otherwise known as the best because you always save the best for last. I'll admit, I would not have known that without you guys in the audience pointing it out to me, more specifically Taylor O'Rourke. Thank you for that. Nevertheless though, why is it here for Ambipom? I tried digging into a billion different ideas and I couldn't come up with a single proper answer, so if you know, let me know. Sunkern ends with Sunny Day and Seed Bomb, while Sunflora switches Seed Bomb for Leaf Storm and Petal Blizzard without getting Seed Bomb at all. Sunny Day is of course because they are sunflower seeds and sunflowers, with sunflowers following the movement of the sun during the day. Seed Bomb only exists for Sunkern because, as I quote from the Dex, a year after a cold summer, their population explodes, making it an easy and direct tie. I would have expected Sunflower to also have Seed Bomb since sunflowers themselves tend to release thousands of seeds, but nope. Instead, through the combination of Leaf Storm and Petal Blizzard, it might just be a powered up way to reference them releasing tons of seeds, other than just repeating Seed Bomb as a final move. At least that's my assumption. Yanma and Yanmega are all about using their wings to create shockwaves that flip houses, cause internal injuries, and more, while also blowing down massive trees whenever Yanmega at least launches into flight. Because of this, we at least get Air Slash and Yanma, but both get U-Turn due to dragonflies in general being some of the most skilled and agile creatures in the air. Moreover, being one of the world's fastest flying insects, which explains why they have Speed Boost as an ability. After all, it takes a lot of speed to strike at the enemy and then retreat before they can land a hit on you, hence U-Turn. You might be just as surprised as I was to find out that Wooper, Paldean Wooper, and Quagsire all have Amnesia, Toxic, and Earthquake as their final moves. Amnesia itself is often given to Pokemon meant to be a little bit more carefree, or maybe even lacking a few brain cells. Earthquakes are strongly associated with amphibians in general, frogs, toads, salamanders, a couple creatures we'll talk about later, as we have with this Pokemon as well. All because there have been reports of these creatures being able to detect pre-seismic cues due to their sensitive nature and connection to underground or aquatic habitats. This is, again, mainly associated with frogs in this case, but we also have seen this behavior in catfish, which we'll again talk about later. Many animals do have some way to sense these things because it's in their best interest to be able to in order to survive. The question is if we can notice that they notice. Now, as for Toxic, you may have expected that to be a Paldean Wooper and Clodsire thing, but in fact, even regular Wooper is a bit on the poisonous side. It's noted that a mucus membrane covers its body. It's a slimy and poisonous film that will cause a shooting pain if you touch it barehanded. In real life, with the animal this line is inspired by, the Japanese giant salamander defends itself from predators by releasing sticky white mucus that is toxic. And just like that, we found our tie. So don't go eating any of these salamanders, or really any salamander for that matter, anytime soon, because I believe many, if not all, salamanders have some level of toxicity, and as such, they're also just going to taste terribly. Meanwhile, Clodsire is really the only outlier here, because its third to final move is Mega Horn, because of those big spikes it gets, of course, that just jump through its body while it gets Amnesia on evolution. The ribs it produces from its body are definitely inspired by the Iberian ribbed newt, which can stab its own ribs through its skin while they are coated with poison. And don't worry, they heal pretty quickly and seem to have no problem with doing this crazy feat of nature over and over again. Foul Play, Sucker Punch, Torment, Quash, the final four moves of Murkrow, while Honchkrows are completely different. For Murkrow, while we might have associated it with witches originally thanks to its hat, it definitely took more of the role of the mobster thanks to Honchkrow's mob boss mentality. I love corvids so much. Crows, ravens, some of the best birds out there, and I'm gonna say that every single time I talk about these Pokemon, but because of a more negative outlook on their kind through society, we often associate them with evil and bad luck. We literally call a group of crows a murder, but at least ravens can be called a conspiracy, so that's dope. Foul play, though, is the nice way to say whether or not people believe that someone was murdered in an investigation, tying the murder of crows right in. Sucker Punch gets into the sneaky stereotype, but the more accurate one gets into torment. I cannot express how many times I've seen blackbirds in general absolutely torment larger birds or command an area no matter what or who comes into that area. If you mess with them, they will remember and they will all torment you. The very last move admittedly was brand new to me, Quash, which is directly translated as postpone, which effectively forces the target to act last in turn. Quash itself also means to nullify, void, or suppress, often used legally to overturn a subpoena or indictment in court. But at least in this case, it could be quashing a rebellion or silencing criticism, something you'd expect of a few mob members when someone talks a little bit too much. Now, Honchkrow does get Foul Play as the third to last move, I'll admit, but we also get Swagger and Nasty Plot for, again, mob boss mentality full of power and intelligence. Because come on, at least in movies and shows, you cannot tell me you don't see the power they always give to mob bosses, how cool they make them look. Meanwhile, Dark Pulse is literally translated as Evil Pulse, so not much to say there, but its final move is another one I have no memory of until now, Comeuppance, which is literally translated as retaliation and works as you would expect. Go against the mob, they retaliate. Doesn't matter who you are, and of course, they're gonna hit you harder to make sure that you learn a lesson and don't try to go after them again. Also, it feels weird talking about some of this because I have family from incredibly shady backgrounds and places like Gary, Indiana, and I just recently talked with my own therapist about my late grandfather, who is definitely not a great person, but always treated family and kids right and nobody questioned him. Luckily, while I grew up in poverty, I didn't really live in the full ghetto, as my mom likes to say. But either way, Mob Boss Honchkrow is dope, and we can move on. We skipped past Mischievous because it was one of the special Pokemon of the first installment, and we lead into Unown. The only move it has is Hidden Power, perfectly representing that this species of Pokemon is fairly weak when alone, but has some sort of hidden ability deep inside of it. We never really get to see this hidden power within the games, or at least like the full combined power in the games, but it's amazing to at least see in the anime how Unown can change day to night, warp reality in its totality, create perfect and powerful copies of Pokemon, and of course are summoned to Arceus' side when it creates Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. The move is literally translated as Awakening Power, which might be easy to then say their power awakens when all of them are together. It does make me a little bit sad that we get to see them have such important roles or appearances within all forms of media, but never really get to see that and the capitalization of their power in the games, or get to even see an event in which we need to worry about this power in the games. Legitimately, if Cyrus could just catch a handful of Unown, he would have had some insane power based on some of the anime episodes, but oh well, maybe one day we'll see a villain do that because, let's be real, it's pretty smart to do. Wobbuffet doesn't have a single move that stands out at first sight. Every single one is at level 1, or whenever they evolve, they have an opportunity to learn it. And Wynaut is really no different in terms of the level 1 moves part. Every single move is meant to protect themselves, convince the opponent to not attack, reflect attacks, or take the opponent down with them. But at a second look, we find that Destiny Bond is a level 1 move and a move learned on evolution. Same can be said for Mirror Coat, Safeguard, and Counter. Protection from critical hits, a reversal of damage for attack and special attack, and when all else fails, if it faints, then it's taking you with it. Originally, before Generation 5, it and Wynaut were the only Pokemon who had Shadow Tag as an ability, making this punching bag a bit of a heart dropper in Nuzlocke, as you may just lose whatever Pokemon sits at the front of your party. So not only is this Pokemon not going to hit you first, but it's just going to keep you locked in prison with it until you do, and either one-shot it or inevitably get bopped back to the Stone Age with a nuclear counter. Now that Farigiraf exists, the signature move of my lovely giraffe is Twin Beam. It decides it wants to be like Frieza and Cooler, shooting laser beams from its freaking eyes, which I have no idea why they went this route to make Girafarig evolve. Like, I get it. The tail and the main head have eyes and a mouth and nothing else in common, but that's still strange. Now, I do understand that it is a multi-hit move, hitting twice, one for the head, one for the tail, and then still doing so since the tail has become a helmet in Farigiraf, but I'm surprised it didn't become a Darkest Lariat situation, especially as giraffes swing their heads around on those long necks in order to fight. I guess you could also tie it to the beta sprite of Girafarig, which was supposed to be a visual palindrome, just as its name is, with the front and back looking exactly alike, with the exception of their colors, which I believe were inverted, thus creating a cat-dog twin situation. So at the end of the day, take your pick as to which one you prefer to explain this move. Forretress is a metal encapsulated bug that can freely explode its outer shell, since that's technically not its actual body, just like how it was with Pineco. So of course we do get Explosion as one of the final moves, but we also get Iron Defense, Gyro Ball, and Double Edge. There's nothing about Forretress tempering its steely body, but we know with Pineco it will add layers of bark to its body in order to disguise and defend itself better, hence Iron Defense. What a naked Pineco looks like interests me, just like the inside of Voltorb, and for the beta sprite of Tangela to become real too. All these Pokemon with hidden true forms just hiding away from our eyes. Now, Gyro Ball is a no-brainer. Steel balls move fast with momentum to hit hard, but the Double Edge is likely the pun, as we see with Rock and Steel types, as we often see them with this move. Giga Drill Break! Okay, that's not exactly what Dunsparce and Dunsparce have as their signature move, but all the Gurren Lagann fans out there are with me on this one, because they are the only Pokemon currently capable of learning the move Hyper Drill, and Dunsparce needs it to evolve in the first place. You also can't blame me when the description states the user spins the pointed part of its body at high speed to pierce the target. This attack can hit a target using a move such as Protect or Detect. It is the ultimate spiral, it breaks through any defense. And this is a super easy tie because these Pokemon will immediately dig into the ground the second that they face danger, so it's just a stronger adaptation to get them away faster. It also has the ability to bore holes through bedrock, which depending on what the bedrock is made of, that's incredibly impressive. To explain better, bedrock is composed of different things, and we have a strong understanding of what each geographical location has as bedrock and how far the area goes for that. It's super important for identifying what land masses were once together, and even when some parts of the world formed based on layer composition, and even how fast water will move on that bedrock in case any of it gets infected, which would be pretty bad. You could have sandstone, you could have diorite, quartz, mudstone. There's a range, and some are easier to break than others are. This isn't Minecraft, where bedrock is the end of our digging journey. It's just another layer that is effectively the basis for everything above it, and there's definitely more to this, but I just decided to oversimplify it, and because I didn't want to drag you through all the geological information, I could save that for a rock Pokemon video or something. Gliscor and Gligar, or Gliscor and Gligar, or whatever the heck you want to say, are the only Pokemon to learn Swords Dance last in their move list. Heracross learns it at the same level of 50, while some legendaries and mythical Pokemon learn it later, but they still don't close with this move. It also has Screech, X-Scissor, and Crabhammer. What is happening here? Okay, it's all gotta be behavioral and visual references. Screech for the screeching of bats since it has the wings, X-Scissor because of it having those claws that it has, Crabhammer because I guess it does have kinda crabby hands by that effect as well, and then it still has Swords Dance. The only thing I can think of is that it does stalk its prey and goes for a critical hit whenever it can, making the process quick as it strikes the throat of its prey. So maybe it's just biding its time, sharpening its claws, and then going for one powerful strike the entire time that it's hunting, shrieking to lower defenses right before impact, and then striking with X-Scissor or Crabhammer to end the fight quickly on any prey they're most effective on. Last resort, play rough, payback, crunch. This is Granbull acting as a dog, or even reluctant guard dog as it is apt to do. It's said in the dex that it is timid and easily spooked, attacking in a flailing motion and only attacking when enraged. And when it does attack, it's noted that the fangs are too heavy for its body, so its head is always tilted down. Despite this, it does have a well-developed lower jaw, meaning that when it does finally attack, it will be one heck of a destructive bite. As for play rough, that's just typical of a number of dog Pokemon. The pufferfish Pokemon, the variant and its evolution, got a pretty good laugh out of me. Because of the spikes, they have acupressure as their semi-final move. If you don't know, acupressure is an alternative medicine for a number of things, but it is pressing on pressure points of the body for various effects. It would also be a reference to acupuncture, which the needles would be able to perform, where effectively the same thing is done but with needles in real life. But their final move learned is Destiny Bond, because if you eat a pufferfish wrong, you will die. They produce tetrodotoxin, and if not properly prepared, then upon ingestion, it basically guarantees death. But of course, people like myself really want to try it, especially for what is supposed to be an incredible umami flavor. Though I will say I've been banned from it, because with my luck, I actually would die, and the taste would be something I could have lived without. Although, with Hisuian Qwilfish and Overqwil, they do have the signature move Barb Barrage, otherwise called Thousand Stingers for exactly the reason that you would expect. Originally, these pufferfish would shoot their needles, but as people learned of their taste and how to overcome these needles, they would eventually evolve to become the pufferfish that we know of in the real world. As a note, these spikes, or rather spines, are actually modified scales that will stand up when real-life pufferfish feel threatened and become even harder to avoid with their bodies inflating through swallowing water. But if you want to know why it lost to dark typing, I recommend checking out my video on all the regional variants. Shuckle's final move is Shell Smash, which makes me a little sad because we know this Pokemon ferments berries inside of its body to make juice, yet it destroys its own shell for some reason. The only reason I can think of is that due to the juice it creates attracting more predators or insects in general, we might find that it's getting hassled too much and it needs to escape. So maybe it doesn't quite smash its shell, but it definitely leaves it behind in order to live another day and finds itself a new shell to live in. It is a mold Pokemon after all, and even though we haven't seen it outside of its shell in the anime or manga or anywhere else to my knowledge, this feels like the only way to make proper sense to me. Swords Dance, Mega Horn, Close Combat, a trio of moves perfectly fitting of Heracross, as this rhinoceros beetle battles others of its kind with its large horn, throwing them in the process with incredible power. Nice and easy entry. Sneasel focuses a lot on being fast, underhanded, and an incredible predator that works in groups. At least the ones in the modern day work this way, as they get beat up for those pack tactics, agility for speed, Screech for surprise attacks, and one good slash that turns critical to put down their prey. Weavile really isn't all that different, adding in Nasty Plot, Night Slash, and Dark Pulse. Nasty Plot is the interesting one because it represents the more intelligent and cunning nature that Weavile have. They are even noted to carve out over 500 different patterns into rocks and trees for communication, showing an incredible amount of intelligence. Now, the Hisuian Sneasel and Sneasler close out the same with agility and Screech, but they don't get beat up in their list because they prefer to fight fair, fighting one-on-one even as they are solitary creatures. Though in the fact that they are fighting poison types, it makes sense that it would end in close combat, as many fighting Pokemon close with. But it doesn't end there, as Dire Claw, otherwise called Fatal Claw, is its current signature move, a poison-type move with an increased crit chance and a 50% chance to poison, paralyze, or turn the target drowsy, which is even more insane when we use a strong style move to boost it to an 80% chance for any of those afflictions to occur. That's some horse right there. Oh, I'm not an underhanded fighter, yet this Pokemon uses poisons on its claws during its fight. Yeah, okay, buddy. Whoever is spreading positive Sneasler propaganda needs to stop. Nevertheless, its Vega Claws are the key piece to it anyhow, strong and capable of cracking through ice and stone for climbing, so it's not surprising that this is their signature move. Teddiursa and Ursaring are another tale of real-life bears, caring, and hibernation. It was surprising to find that Teddiursa's final moves are Rest, Snore, and Thrash, as if all it does is sleep. And as it turns out, bear cubs are born typically in January and February, nursing for the first few months of their existence and sleeping until they come out of the dens alongside their mothers for the first time. Meanwhile, Ursaring sprinkles in high horsepower and hammer arm for the speed and devastating claw attacks that they own. They have enough power to devastate anyone who would dare threaten their cubs without having to do one of those pathetic little life-risking tackles everyone else does. But this also works for Ursaluna, who is far more attuned to the earth itself thanks to the peat block used on a full moon to help it evolve. And while it doesn't have a signature move, it does have the special Blood Moon form, which is the only Pokemon currently known to have the move Blood Moon and the ability Mind's Eye, which allows it to hit ghosts with normal type moves as it has awakened. Peat in the real world can approximately take 1,000 years to form, and thanks to a long-lived age, we find that Ursaluna became this Blood Moon form, a devastating yokai in its own right, despite not having lived for 1,000 years. Instead, it has lived for over 100, which is typically one of these stretches of time needed for animals to become yokai in myth. Blood Moon, the move, is described as the following. The user unleashes the full brunt of its spirit from a full moon that shines as red as blood. The Blood Moon symbolizes not only omens and turmoil, but despite that, it is still a full moon, something that represents enlightenment and spiritual awakening. And if you've been on this channel for a while, you know I can't resist pointing newer viewers to my video all about the secrets of the one-eyed immortals in Pokemon. It's actually insane how often we find incredibly powerful or seemingly immortal beings in Pokemon or other franchises who only show or only have one eye. Sluggma has Recover, Flamethrower, and Earth Power to represent its ability to just enter lava and recover itself, use Firepower, and how if it does stop moving around as much, it will slowly become encased in rock scales that would allow it to naturally evolve into Magcargo, who does have Earth Power as a level 1 move. What I love is that it does also get Shell Smash on evolution, so you could theoretically say that if you were to smash the shell, it could return back to being Sluggma, properly devolving in that capacity. The majority of moves that they have are related to lava, magma, volcanic eruptions, and ancient rocks overall, which I had to at least note because it's fairly cool in my opinion. For Mamoswine, it is in full reference towards elephants and how they act when attacking or panicking, with a bit of extra ice added in. Takedown for the big charge, Earthquake for the stomping of feet as you can feel them approaching from even a distance, Blizzard for the big ice age, and Thrash for the absolutely devastating attack from the trunk and stomping around. Although there is one funny move added in where elephants in the real world do have exceptional memory capabilities, yet they've given this ancestor of elephants the move Amnesia of all things. For our resident coral Pokemon, just as real coral polyps will build up their calcium-based homes, we find that Corsola closes with moves Recover and Mirror Coat, but for the Galarian variants and Corsola, it replaces Recover with Grudge, since it is incapable of actually recovering and restoring its body. This is because it has bleached and effectively died, leaving it to only be able to regain any level of life by actually stealing it from others, eventually allowing it to break free from its shell rather than regenerating it with its new ectoplasmic spiritual self. I would talk more, but I talked plenty about Coral in my last video about extinct and endangered Pokemon, so not to overly shill other videos, but go watch that. Octillery, our artillery octopus, focuses a lot on beam attacks or anything we would consider from firearms in general. Psybeam, Aurora Beam, Bubble Beam, Lock On, Bullet Seed, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, Hyper Beam, all moves it learns. It also gets Soak added in there as it drags you under the water, but its signature move is Octazooka. It is a literal octopus bazooka attack, even though it is technically supposed to be a tank in its own right, to my understanding, based on old beta sprites, which even had a Revolver Remoraid. Sounds like a Metal Gear Solid character, Revolver Ocelot. It's simple, but it's effective. Octillery brings a slew of guns to every single battle it joins. Delibird is another incredibly simple one since its signature move is Present. In fact, Present and Drill Peck are the only two moves it naturally learns. It is the Sansa bird through and through, so naturally Present would be the move that stands out the most for it. Mantine is a no-brainer as it has Bounce, Takedown, and Hydro Pump. Bounce for all the flying in the air it does as it flies out of the water, breaking from it and soaring before landing back down. Takedown is really the only thing it can do as it slams into others, but I'm surprised it doesn't have like Double Edge, since it is a caring Pokemon that also cares for Remoraid, as they have a positive mutualistic relationship with each other. And of course, Hydro Pump is just a classic for water Pokemon finishers. Skarmory's signature move is Steel Wing, because it has steel wings. Even its feathers were used to make new swords, like all you would need to do is wrap some covering around the base and you'd probably be good to go. Big surprise. In a moment of absolute baller referencing, arguably one of the best and one of my favorites out of everything we've gone over, so good that I had to rewrite the intro to include it, Houndoom's final move is Inferno, which is directly translated as Purgatory, all because this is a Pokemon whose Japanese name is Helgar. So we get things like Hell, Dante's Inferno, and his journey through Purgatory, and it's so obvious and cool, and I love it. I actually have the full series of that, and I really need to read it. I have so many books that I need to read, which will only give me more ideas for the channel. We have more elephant business in the form of Phanpy and Donphan. On one hand, Phanpy has Charm, Last Resort, and Double Edge. It's a little elephant that really does not want to fight, but is strong enough to break bones when it plays by swinging around its trunk. And of course, it gets Charm. Have you seen how cute Phanpy is? Meanwhile, as we saw with our Mamoswine friend, we get things like Stomping Tantrum and Earthquake, but then Donphan closes with Giga Impact, as it will roll into a ball and use its entire body to slam into anyone it deems as a threat. Weirdeer and Stantler's signature move is Psyshield Bash or Barrier Rush, a move described as cloaking oneself in psychic energy and then slamming into their target. Based on that description, I'm a little surprised that it wasn't something that existed for Mewtwo. The way that Stantler does evolve into Weirdeer, though, is by using this move at least 20 times, although in the modern day they're unable to evolve anymore. It's a move that has effectively not been needed as much over the years, and they've lost their ability to transform, similar to how, let's say, an organ may have atrophied. These Pokemon are usually peaceful and only really attack if you attack first, or if you corner them, as they'd rather prefer to run away while trapping you in a momentary illusion to secure their escape. So this move would be perfect for charging past you even when they are fully cornered if they have to. Smeargle can only have Sketch as a move because it is a painter. That's it. Sausage Nipples the Miltank used to be the only Pokemon who had the move Milk Drink. I don't think I need to explain that one any further at all. But in case you were wondering how that works, it is commonly seen using Rollout, as your nightmares might remind you, meaning it is fully capable of bending over and latching on as it deems fit. Unless you would rather imagine a horror show where the nipple extends like some sort of clown's balloon. You're welcome. We've already made it to the legendary Pokemon Raikou, yet to no surprise, as it often gets treated the worst out of the trio of legendary beasts, it doesn't even get a signature move or standout move. Sure, it gets Zap Cannon in the modern day, which is very powerful and will paralyze the target without fail, but otherwise it's lackluster for the Pokemon meant to represent the great bolt of lightning that set flame to the Brass Tower. Give it a massive thunderstorm or something. At least when it was first released, it did end its move list with Thunder, which was fitting there, but there's nothing super special about it now. Entei embodies the passion of magma. This Pokemon is thought to have been born in the eruption of a volcano, all while its roars will cause volcanoes to erupt somewhere across the globe, which is then perfectly represented through its final move, Eruption, as we talked about earlier. But to add insult to injury, Entei can now learn Ho-Oh's signature move, Sacred Fire, ever since Generation 6, meaning that Suicune, in lore, is Ho-Oh's favorite, Entei gets to make use of Ho-Oh's Great Flames. Meanwhile, Raikou gets shit on because it represents the thing that caused the calamity of the tower burning, and Ho-Oh's best friend Lugia to then fly away forever. Entei also gets Extreme Speed from remembering the move because it is unable to restrain its extreme power and just runs headlong across the lands. He's just like me, for real, for real. Now the best beast is here in the form of Suicune, friend of the unknown, closest to Ho-Oh of the beasts, and the purifier of water wherever it goes as it travels with the northern winds. And wow! Raikou really is just forced to stay in the basement because while yes, thematically it makes sense for Suicune to also be able to relearn Extreme Speed as it does, since it races across the world purifying water, it means that Raikou is super left out as it's the only one of the three that cannot be reminded of that move. Suicune can also be re-taught Sheer Cold, relating again to the northern wind and even the northern lights. We see this in full effect thanks to the Arctic lands of the Shiver snowfields, where we get to see Suicune race over the waters in its usual graceful fashion. Other than this, it closes with Rain Dance, Hydro Pump, and Blizzard for fairly obvious reasons. While Larvitar and Pupitar only have Hyper Beam to close with as notable finishing moves, Tyranitar has Thrash, Sandstorm, Hyper Beam, and Giga Impact. Because of course, the Pokemon meant to represent the great Godzilla will thrash about the city, causing massive amounts of destruction through big strikes and its signature Laser Beam, all while kicking up tons of dust and debris. To be fair on the Sandstorm though, it also can have Sandstream as an ability, so it is constantly releasing a ridiculous amount of sand to lower visibility and make it feel like the environment itself has a chokehold on you while it continues to destroy everything in Tyranitar's rampage. Lugia has held on to its signature move Aeroblast all this time, ever since it first got it, and not only that, but it even has a Shadow form, which is the only Pokemon capable of using the move Shadow Blast. Now don't get me wrong, it makes perfect sense that Entei would get Ho-Oh's signature move, but Lugia just flexed on all of these Pokemon by saying it wants not one, but two signature moves, and it will not be sharing with anybody. Watch as, in Pokemon Winds and Waves, some other Pokemon gets Aeroblast, which it would make sense, but I would eat my words then. But with Aeroblast, it is described as a vortex of air being shot at the foe with a high crit chance. Assuming this is meant to represent a polar vortex, which we can support with Lugia's appearance within Incredibly Freezing Lands within its debut movie, we can tie this to that polar vortex. Now, a polar vortex is a low pressure area, a wide expanse of swirling cold air that is parked in polar regions. During winter, the polar vortex at the North Pole expands, sending cold air downward. This happens fairly regularly and is often associated with outbreaks of cold temperatures in the United States. This does not mean it is the cause for hurricanes or tornadoes, but disruptions in it can cause mid-latitude storms and cold outbreaks, something very fitting considering Lugia is known to cause 40-day storms. Meanwhile, despite me making a big deal about it, Shadow Blast is just the Shadow version of Aeroblast, which maybe one of these days I need to cover Shadow Pokemon or how energy works in the world of Pokemon overall. As stated earlier, Ho-Oh's signature move is Sacred Fire if we don't include Entei's use of it. This fire would be the very same flame, I assume, that would reignite the lives and spirits of the Pokemon that fell in the Brass Tower, allowing them to be revived as the legendary beasts. But Ho-Oh has another move that stands out. Moves that it learns at level 90 and 99 actually, Sky Attack and Overheat. As a reminder, Sky Attack's real name is God Bird, while Overheat would also represent the power of the Phoenix, a creature that lives, bursts into flames, falls to ash, and then is reborn or revived, much like the legendary beasts in their past lives' final moments. I will never get tired of calling legendary mythical Pokemon God Pokemon, or rather Kami, because that's truly what they are at the end of the day, and that is what Ho-Oh is. And these moves help support that even further, which, again, I know I'm throwing a lot of ideas out, but maybe I need a fully dedicated video on Pokemon being Kami as well. The final Pokemon of Generation 2 is Celebi, and just like our other mythical Mew, it has a slew of moves that are gained starting at level 1, and then it gains new moves at 10, 20, 30, so on and so forth. While Mew's moves were more intricate, Celebi's are still very specially chosen, but relate to nature and the power of healing with a big reference in its last 4 moves: Future Sight, Healing Wish, Leaf Storm, and Perish Song. If we move it out of order, then we get the death of Celebi from the movie as it makes its last call in Perish Song. This call then summons the past and future versions of Celebi, Future Sight, to come to its aid from across time and space. They come down to grant a healing wish, and upon the revival of Celebi, then a storm of leaves fly through the air as it celebrates its own revival. Mythical Pokemon really do bridge the gap in special ways between the anime and the games, with the only real way to know their lore being through movies, the shows, or the manga, so it's still wild to me that people would completely deny the use of other media when analyzing the meaning behind events, people, and Pokemon in the games. I understand being a little bit more critical and trying to find things that do make sense and actually align with each other, but to completely deny it just kind of ruins the fun at the end of the day, I have to admit. We're covering 2 generations in one video this time, and you already knew this because of the thumbnail, so I don't know why I'm saying it now, but I'm interested in seeing if anyone understands the anime reference for the thumbnail. But again, moving forward, Sceptile's signature move is Leaf Blade. This is another no-brainer at all because of it having literal leaf blades attached to its body that are used as its primary form of attack and defense. These leaves have been honed and developed to the point where they are able to slice down even thick trees with ease. Wait, how have I gone all these years without realizing Mega Sceptile doesn't have a move that is literally or directly using the tail it launches as a rocket as one of its attacks? Like, I understand it might use it in animations, but there isn't an actual move called, like, I don't know, Pine Missile or something. I blame the fact that I never actually played Oris, but maybe I'll Blind Nuzlocke it one of these days like I did for X and Ultra Moon, but like, how is that not a thing? The other two, I kind of get it, but for Mega Sceptile especially, it seems like that should be a thing. Blaze Kick is the signature move of Blaziken, as you would expect of the Muay Thai chicken, who focuses on those flying knees and kicks and fiery dynamic entries. Now, Muay Thai does have a lot of strong kicks as part of its methods as a martial art, but there's another detail you might notice within the anime for Blaziken. Muay Thai has elbow strikes, close range grappling or gripping to control the posture of the opponent, sweeping, throwing, and knee strikes. It's not about long range punches, it's about short range combat that's fluid in motion for better overall control, offense, and defense. And I don't know why I tried to make movements. I don't know Muay Thai. I only know how to throw whatever standard punch. I'm not an expert, so just take all that with a grain of salt, but it does match pretty well with Blaziken's combative behavior, making the Blaze Kick just one asset of its overall arsenal, making sense that while it is the signature move, it is not even the most powerful move it has. Muddy Water is easily explained as Swampert's signature move since it has adapted to excel in marshy environments and wetlands overall, but it's also very unique in that it has become so physically strong and skilled regarding water that it can be brought to a move reminder to pick up Surf and Rock Smash, 2 HM moves. Well, at least they would be HM moves, but they really aren't a thing anymore, so I suppose that kind of takes away how impressive that is at a second glance, but oh well. Not a lot to say here with all 3 of the starters because they have very simple and very clear meanings behind their signature moves. Gotta say though, had a lot of fun creating the thumbnail with Mega Meganium and Mega Swampert. Took me a bit to land on what Pokemon to have there, and it's the only reason I'm actually including Gen 3 in this video because I didn't want to change the thumbnail. Really dug my own coffin there. Good old Mightyena, a staple of history on this channel, who closes out its move list with Sucker Punch and Play Rough, which, despite consistently being mixed up as being dogs, even by yours truly, which would explain the Play Rough, hyenas are more closely related to cats as they are cat-like carnivores in the Hyaenidae family, which does include dogs, wolves, and foxes, but canids these are not. I'd like to assume that this was an intentional choice on Pokemon's part, since it's a common mistake and a good reference to it, all while they've also had such insane hidden details that match up with real-life ecology and biology so well. Linoone is fast and easy. When hunting, Linoone will make a beeline straight for the prey at a full run. While this Pokemon is capable of topping 60 miles per hour, it has to come to a screeching halt before it can turn, otherwise it will slam right into its prey, explaining why it has life-risking tackle as its final move. Its Galarian form ends the same, but it gets taunts beforehand, considering the entire Galarian line is known for being very antagonistic, taunting and goading enemies into attacking first, so they can counter, which is exactly what their third to last move is, counter. And to tie it all together, the fourth to last move is Scary Face thanks to the face paint-like look they have, which is of course a reference to the band Kiss. Obstagoon does have its own signature move as well, of course, being Obstruct, which is literally called blocking. Obstruct protects the user from all effects of physical and special moves that target it during the turn that it is used. If Obstruct blocks an attack that would make contact with the user, the attacker's defense stat is lowered by 2 stages. It causes the defense stat to drop even if the user of Obstruct was immune to that contact move. This is an intimidation tactic meant to shock the attacker. Obstagoon eats the hit while striking a pose and screams at the attacker like nothing happened to it whatsoever, literally being in the face of the thing you hit as it eats that hit and screams back in your face like an insignificant insect, thus explaining why it is a dark type underhanded move as it catches you off guard. Despite being vastly different final evolutions, Beautifly and Dustox both learn Quiver Dance as their final move. This goes back to the same reason as to why Butterfree closes with the same move, not just because they are flying insects, but because dancing is the ritual in which they vie for mates and also combat each other to outcompete for mates. Simple and clean once again. Isn't that the Kingdom Hearts song? Ludicolo's line has a combination of moves that they close with, while Ludicolo itself doesn't necessarily have anything that stands out. Although common moves are Rain Dance, Zen Headbutt, and Energy Ball. I spent a good 10 straight minutes just looking into the air, trying to mentally dissect the reason for Zen Headbutt until I practiced technically genuine Zen and felt it naturally come to me. As a note of clarification, part of my beliefs stem from Zen Buddhism, which does involve meditation, exploring thoughts with mindfulness or thoughtfulness, to not be too passive or too aggressive, to find, and this is the important part, balance in everything. And that's exactly what Ludicolo somehow does. It is a Pokemon that constantly dances, doing so when full of energy from music. This music flows through its body, becoming one with it as it takes in joy and cheerful energy and lets out joy and cheerful energy, immersed in the moment as it takes and gives in equal amounts, all up to the point where it does release an energy ball. This move is less about the energy that it absorbs and uses from nature, and more about the natural energy in general from music. Its thoughtfulness, which Zen Headbutt is also called Thoughtful Headbutt, is a strong reference to this. Its thoughts are full of music. And if that's wrong, so be it. This is all fun theorizing and trying to find thematic ties, and this is the closest I could get realistically for Ludicolo here. Seedot caught me off guard by closing with Explosion. Its first few moves makes sense before evolution as it absorbs nutrients, grows, uses rollout to cover itself in dirt, and then it evolves as an acorn would grow, but instead becomes Nuzleaf. Although I have a small belief that not every Seedot becomes Nuzleaf and instead do become oak trees, but that's neither here nor there. As it turns out though, there's a long-standing myth that acorns full-on explode when exposed to enough heat, because you know, corn, popcorn, acorn, but again, this is not the case. Instead, the shell might crack or shatter before the pressure needed for a popcorn-like explosion is reached. But also, for clarification, shatter isn't in the same sense as a shrapnel explosion, if that's what you're thinking. But Seedot achieves this through gaining Sunny Day for adding an extra bit of heat a few moves before it gets Explosion. Now I expected Grass Whistle for Nuzleaf since it talks about playing sounds and music with a leaf on its head, but nope, doesn't learn that at all. Instead it focuses on sharp leaf attacks like Razor Leaf and Leaf Blade, while also bothering and scaring intruders that come into its forest from the shades of the forest with moves like Torment, Fake Out, Astonish, and Swagger. Lastly, the move that sticks out the most to me for Shiftry is Hurricane. Legends tell of a bird Pokemon that received divine punishment for its evil deeds and had its beak and wings replaced. It is said that when Shiftry flaps its leafy fans atop ancient trees, chilly winds blow and the season rolls into winter. Yet where do we first meet Shiftry? In Hoenn, a humid and tropical jungle even. The perfect place for cold air to be added and help create great storms, hurricanes. Swalot closing with Brave Bird and Reversal is a testament to its first dex entry. Swalot flies high above our heads, making graceful arcs in the sky. This Pokemon dives at a steep angle as soon as it spots its prey. I've personally been harried by an army of swallows rather, in real life, and by harried I mean about 50 or so were flying in the air above me and making so much ridiculous amounts of noise while I was collecting samples of stream water for analysis, and they were fast. They made a lot of arguably graceful movements in the air and would not leave me alone until I was much farther away from their nests, which were attached to the underside of a bridge. What I'm saying here is that swallows are known to be smooth, beautiful, graceful flyers, and they might be a very difficult bird to photograph even, letting Swalot live up to the namesake with its habits and these moves. Wingull also holds reference to its real-life counterpart, the seagull, as their final move is Hurricane. There is no creature that wants to get caught in a hurricane to my knowledge, excluding maybe plants, maybe, because seeds get flung further if they survive, but seagulls will completely abandon the seas and come onto land in order to find safety because they and many other birds can tell when a major storm is approaching. In fact, I've worked in nature long enough that my fiance still gets baffled when I can tell it's going to light rain or even storm, and roughly when it will without even looking at weather channels or weather reports. It's all about birds being inland, birds being lower because of the weather, and insects being lower, sudden warm air on a cool day as the wind picks up, and so much more. It's a combination of things, and as they add up, you can tell how bad the storm's gonna get without ever even seeing a cloud in the sky. Wingull is just another master of this, and ironically, instead of running from the storm, it brings the hurricane to its foes. Pelipper just adds in Hydro Pump, which is because as it dives into the water, as real pelicans will, it might get its meal of fish, but they're also picking up a lot of water too. The lower half of a pelican's bill can hold close to 20 liters or 5 gallons of water, but they drain it out before swallowing their prey, and Pelipper just chooses the express route, shooting it all out at once. Gardevoir and Gallade only work properly when put side to side, which is a no-duh of course, but when we break down final moves we see it clearly. Honestly, we could break down all their moves, not that I will. Instead, we get nothing but special and status moves from Gardevoir, while ending in Calm Mind, Psychic, Moonblast, Dream Eater, and Future Sight. Moves that are going to mess with the mind or spirituality as you would expect of the Psychic Fairy. You could even argue that it uses Future Sight to assist in not only damage, but also tell Gallade where its targets will be next as it continues to attack from a distance. After all, Future Sight is also a guaranteed hit in the anime and main games. There is no escape, and so you could predict an opponent's position in the future as well. We then lead into Gallade, who is a Gallant Knight, protecting Gardevoir while attacking with great power. Psycho Cut, Heal Pulse, Wide Guard, Quick Guard, and of course Close Combat. It is hitting as hard as possible while protecting Gardevoir, other Pokemon, and people, even going as far as trying to heal them quickly. This is of course supported even by dex entries that state when trying to protect someone, Gallade extends its elbows as if they were swords and fights savagely. Masquerain closes with Quiver Dance as it matches its ability to use its 4 wings to freely fly in any direction, even sideways and backwards, allowing it to be a fancy dancer and maybe even attract others of its kind with the right vibrance on its patterning while intimidating foes with the same patterning. What caught my eye though was Surskit closing with Sticky Web of all things. This might be the only way they could tie in its dex entry that states it secretes oil from the tips of its feet so it can walk on water as if it were skating. Meanwhile, real life water striders are just so light and spread themselves out just right to ensure they don't break the surface tension of the water. Also, Surskit does feed on microorganisms, and as an obligatory joke of the channel, I have to mention that I will go crazy if I don't ever get my Plankton Pokemon, which is mentioned in multiple dex entries. I actually wonder if anyone has started like a bingo card for things that I do or say. There's so many habits that I have when doing these videos and so many hours of footage that there has to be plenty of consistent things that I do on purpose or by accident. Shroomish has Spore as its closer, as we would expect of any mushroom really, being the way that they're able to spread their kinds throughout the world. Although, spores from Shroomish are so toxic that they make trees and weeds wilt apparently, so maybe they're a bit more dangerous than common spores. Meanwhile, the second that Breloom gets its extendo arms, it is punching like a madman. Mach Punch, Force Palm, Brick Break, Dynamic Punch, and Focus Punch, all while still spreading spores and seeds. And yes, I said seeds because there are countless spores inside of the seeds that they have, and it's not recommended to inhale or eat them. They also seem to feed on trees and plants as per their dex, so maybe they are just a tree fungus at the end of the day, which explains why they like humid climates and jungles. They even take these seeds, throw them onto the trees, and they drain them of the nutrients almost parasitically in that effect, which is a little scary. The Slack Off line is all over the place, and I was already in a state of surprise when I read that Play Rough is Slack Off's last move. I remember a lot from when I got to meet a sloth named Guy in person. Real calm creature, loved corn, loved his heater more when it was 70 degrees out, Fahrenheit of course, and his fur was like a coarse broom but still pleasant to the touch. I was also told not to let it grab my hand because if it grabs it, it will not let go and it will bite my fingers. And when I did meet him, I remember nothing though about sloths playing in any way, but as it turns out, baby sloths can move quite a bit faster, as we see from the Zoological Society of London. It's just important for sloths as adults to move slower because they like to conserve energy while also being less noticeable to predators thanks to slower movement. And with less movement, an overall slower lifestyle, it means that they need less food, as they will also metabolize their food slower as well. Of course, Play Rough is likely also an allusion towards the high energy Vigoroth, who is closing with Throat Chop, Counter, Focus Punch, and Reversal. It is running at you, attacking you, hitting you back if you hit it, and just constantly harrying their opponents as you would expect as a relentless hurricane of claws that this creature is. But when it does evolve into Slacking, of course, and it gets through its midlife crisis, its signature move is Slack Off. It's done enough. It just wants to eat food and relax, which is a little crazy because its ability can only ever be Truant, unless switched via another move in battle, of course. So if you have it Slack Off, it just rests for 2 turns in a row, eating the grass around it as it's apt to do. To be fair though, life to many creatures is eat, rest, mate, die, repeat. Can't really repeat that, but you know, you have babies for a reason and they could grow up and then they can do that. So slacking is just really making the best of its life by staying fit for survival. Also, obligatory eat, spawn, die shirt plug on the Acrylics Closet Teespring. Go check it out for all the merch. Nincada's line is far simpler by comparison. Dig because Nincada lives underground like you would expect of cicada nymphs. X-Scissor for Ninjask, as many of our clawed bugs have. And Shedinja closes with Phantom Force, which is actually called Ghost Dive, which you could tie back to Dig, while also of course representing Shedinja's new spooky typing. I always thought Boom Burst was originally the signature move of Exploud, but apparently not. It specifically closes with Hyper Voice, Boom Burst, and Hyper Beam, all being very powerful special moves, though Hyper Beam stands out since it isn't a sound move, which is a bit interesting. Now, I did recently talk plenty about this line in my video on sound Pokemon, which, whew, one guy got super upset over me making a video on something that doesn't exist. Like, bro, I do this for my job and I have fun with it, but please keep commenting despite never watching the video. He admitted it himself, which was even funnier. YouTube doesn't know what a negative comment is, so you're just helping the channel anyway. It's just really funny to me when people think I won't be mean to them if they're mean to me, or they think continually commenting how stupid I am actually means anything at all. Like, brother, it is the internet. You stop existing the second I look away from my screen. The only people who continue to exist are the ones that, like, engage in great conversations or have something nice to say or something for me to keep in my thoughts that makes me think even more. So, you know, do what you will, I guess. But I digress. This boy is built like a barrel, which matches what we would see in the apparently ripped core of the white bellbird, who reaches 125 decibels as it calls out and sings to mates, a level of decibel equivalent to rock concerts, firecrackers, or pneumatic drills, all while exceeding beyond the threshold for human hearing pain by itself. And by comparison, the entire Whismur line has equal attack and special attack base stats, showing their physical bodies have to withstand the force of their sounds just like the white bellbird has to in real life. Alright, please follow me on this one. Makuhita is the last 3 moves, close combat because of course, but then it moves quickly around its opponent with Reversal, and then T-poses to close with Heavy Slam as it drops on top of the opponent to finish them. It's too perfect to be anything else, and I refuse to believe anything else. The only difference is that Hariyama adds Headlong Rush as its final move, which is definitely a reference to the stereotype of sumo wrestlers just slamming their bodies into each other, especially at the beginning of the match. While I won't get into it here because there's so much to cover still, sumo is definitely far more than that, and it takes an incredible amount of skill. Remember, they are getting large and still moving with the skill of great martial arts. They aren't just bumping bellies with each other, and it's impressive. It takes mass to move mass. I'm surprised to find Probopass ends with Stone Edge, Lock-On, and Zap Cannon. The last two are typically kept for Pokemon created by humans like Magnemite, but I suppose it extends towards steel types in general. Also, I'm making an assumption. I believe there's nothing confirming that Magnemite was created, but there's a couple other examples. But either way, I suppose it extends towards steel types in general, because to my understanding, there's nothing that says even these guys were created by humans either. The Stone Edge itself is likely because it controls 3 units called Mini Noses using magnetic force. With them, it can attack foes from 3 different directions, which really is just used to hunt prey. The signature move of Skitty, not even Delcatty, was Assist, which is actually called Cat's Paw in direct translation, which is such a massive difference. But there's one thing I can immediately think of that may match up perfectly as to why, when it does evolve into Delcatty, it looks so regal, and it's all because of the Maneki Neko. The story of the Maneki Neko silently exists in the modern day through the waving cat statues that you'll typically see. This is because stories have been passed down since the 17th century, where a warlord was walking only to be enticed to pet a cat that was waving to it. As he walked towards the cat, stepping away from the tree he was under, lightning struck the tree where he was again standing. As such, through the wave of a cat's paw, he was assisted and avoided what could have been death in that moment. The Lord then became a patron of the temple that the cat belonged to, allowing it to live lavishly. We then find this reflected in Delcatty, who is strongly associated with Pokemon contests, while being a Pokemon that does not like to fight, is literally called the prim Pokemon, and would rather nap and live life at its own pace. As I look at Sableye, I realize I really do need to take my shot at an abilities video again. I tried long ago and I got a bit burnt out, but with abilities like Stall, which are unique to Sableye, it could be fun if I find the, unique line to talk about it with. But Sableye simply closes with Foul Play, which isn't surprising since it is meant to represent a thief or burglar that isn't afraid to do anything it needs to in order to get some more delicious gems inside of its stomach, even if it's murder, hence Foul Play. Mawile live in caves because they are able to camouflage their hair while having their bodies stand out instead. This is apparently vital towards playing and survival. I originally thought it was just a reverse anglerfish situation and how they hunted, but now I believe in the following. It closes with Iron Head and Taunt, hiding its iron hair and inviting foes to approach through the taunt, only to hit them. But from there, if you're a friend, it might actually play rough. Otherwise, it will hit you with a strong dynamic punch, which is not what I expected for its final move. Of course, Play Rough would also work on other cave dwellers, often found in the same habitat, like Sableye, who we just talked about, so that's definitely important to note. The entire Aggron line is the only line of Pokemon I have found so far, assuming I didn't miss anything, where all 3 forms have the same exact move list that they naturally learn in the 9th generation main lines. They even learn all of their moves at the same exact level, and I think this is far more interesting than their final move of Head Smash. This shows that their behaviors are meant to be exactly the same as they grow and evolve. They eat iron ore, they smash into things that threaten the environments that they love, and only when it's Aggron can it serve to restore said habitats that it loves, as per its dex entries. Meditite transforms from using direct attacks into a Pokemon that commits to acupressure, increasing its abilities, and then countering through the literal move counter and reversal, which that does more damage the less HP that it has. Effectively, it becomes less offensive and more of a passive creature that only attacks if attacked, indulging in its meditative training more and more so it can evolve into Medicham. Once it does reach that point, apparently, at least in Paldea, Medicham finally learns Axe Kick as a new finisher. Otherwise, it would have closed on the same exact moves that Meditite did. It's, I guess, finally putting those big ol' thighs to use, as an Axe Kick involves striking upwards, but then more importantly, coming down with the heel of your foot, which could be way more devastating in terms of a move if you manage to pull it off properly. Medicham really was choosing meditation and peace for years, until Paldea messed with it, I guess. The only dog to not get play rough at all so far, because it is not a dog but rather a wolf, is Manectric, who instead gets Wild Charge and Thunder. They nest wherever lightning strikes unnaturally and create their own thunderclouds to drop lightning bolts as per their decks. Gotta say, electric and fighting Pokemon are some of the easiest to explain because it's just the same moves over and over again to close with. Minun and Plusle not only have Nuzzle as a move that stands out through the move reminder, but they both close with Nasty Plot and Entrainment, with Entrainment's real name being Befriend. So they're not even here for fighting. They're here to make friends and cuddle, unless you really do bother them. Then of course, they just Nasty Plot Thunder to Oblivion together as best friends. While Volbeats and Illumis close with Infestation, which feels a little unfair since fireflies have problems in the real world mating thanks to our very bright lights, they do have a cooperative story going on between them and their moves otherwise. For Volbeats, it has the signature move Tail Glow, which of course alludes to having the right attractive light display to attract mates, as we would see with fireflies of course. But instead of just getting Play Rough and Bug Buzz as Illumis does, Volbeat sneaks in a life-risking tackle as well. These two do also take inspiration from Greasers with their fashion sense, so we might be able to say that Volbeat is going to step into the role of being a protector of Illumis, while she supports through moves like Encore and Flatter, which Volbeat does not get in its natural move list. Budew starts off only being able to do 4 things: Absorb for nutrients and water, Growth, Stun Spore for the toxic pollen that it releases that can cause paralysis, and Charm because it's such an adorable little goober. Roselia actually is the only one of this line to have the signature move Grass Whistle, which, I get it. It puts Pokemon to sleep with that move, but the scent of Roselia is supposed to be the thing that gives the relaxing effect, while it says nothing about making sounds whatsoever. I guess a good wind making sounds on its leaves would also carry their perfume if we want to go that route. Meanwhile, it and Roserade would otherwise end in Poison Jab, Synthesis, Toxic, and Leaf Storm. Poison Jab is shown through dex entries stating each of its hands have different toxins that it does jab at its prey with, both hitting with near fatal power. Toxic is pretty self-explanatory at this point, but Leaf Storm has often been used as not just an attack, but similarly to Petal Dance, it provides a dazzling display that hurts opponents while Roserade dances or even uses it in Pokemon contests. Swalot is all about swallowing and spitting things back up. Don't take that out of context. But seriously, Stockpile, Spit Up, Swallow, Sludge Bomb, Gastro Acid, Belch. This thing is just one giant stomach that breaks down anything and everything it can put into its mouth with its gastric acid, even poisonous things. And as long as it has time to digest, then all that's left is the gas when it belches. Otherwise, it will just douse you with highly toxic fluid that it secretes from its mustache. Quick and easy, Sharpedo and Carvanha have life-risking tackle because they're just charging at the first thing that they can see and eat, fitting the movie stereotype of piranhas and sharks to a T. As said in the intro, Wailord's final move is Water Spout. The healthier Wailord is, the more damage it does. We assume this then relates to the lung capacity of a whale. Healthy whale, more breath that it releases when it surfaces on the water, as you would assume. From the National Marine Life Center, I bring you the following though. It is a whale's fountain made of water. Both whales and people use lungs and noses to breathe air, but because whales live in the water, their noses and lungs work differently from yours. Whales don't breathe as often as you do. They breathe only when they are on the surface of the ocean. That means that they have to take in and let out a lot of air quickly. Their lung muscles are strong enough to force almost all the air out at once. One breath just about empties their lungs. In contrast, one of your breaths empties only part of your lungs. When a whale comes to the surface after a dive, it breathes out the quote-unquote old air quickly, all in one breath. Because the whale empties its lungs with such force, the air travels a great distance, 10, 20, even 40 feet. And because its nose is on top of its head, the air goes straight up. This air is usually warmer than the air just above the surface of the ocean, so the water vapor condenses. This condensed water vapor looks like steam. The same thing happens when you see your own breath on a cold day. So the spout, quote unquote, you see, is not a fountain of water. Rather, it's a stream of warm air being forced out of the whale's lungs, aka the whale's breath. Some whale watch guides can even tell you the kind of whale that has just come to the surface even before they see the animal, based on the height and the shape of their spout. Despite this, Wailord seems to actually be shooting water at you, so, try not to drown. While Numel closes with life-risking Tackle, Camerupt has Earthquake, the first sign you get before a volcano erupts, thanks to all that pressure being released in such an explosive way. Unfortunately for you though, it learns Eruption as a level 1 move, so might be a little late for that warning. Torkoal's 2 final moves are something else, Shell Smash and Eruption, which is a bit messed up when you think about it, because if a turtle or tortoise has its shell smashed, it's typically going to die without human intervention. And so Torkoal's Shell Smashing is likely its last act to let out the greatest eruption of power it has for whatever reason it may be in the dire combat it might be involved in. For Spoink and Grumpig, of course, Bounce is the last move that they learn as they utilize all the bouncing they've done in life for an attack now, but the signature move of Grumpig was Magic Coat. This would allow it to not only protect itself from special moves like Worry Seed or Poison Gas, but also bounce it back at the offender. This is likely because Grumpig uses the black pearls on its body to amplify its psychic power waves for gaining control or total control over its foe. In addition, black pearls symbolize things such as true love, luck, wisdom, and most importantly, protection against evil, explaining why it has this effect and power with Grumpig, while also throwing in the pun of bouncing back effects. Spinda hits you with a teeter dance for its signature because that's all it does. It teeters and it dances. And because of these uneven and lurching movements, its final move is of course Thrash. So when it does find its target, it's just stumbling all over itself and still somehow winning the fight. Really does help when your opponents can't predict your movements because you can't even predict your own movements. Actually, that would work incredibly well for an opponent that's trying to read your mind in order to win a fight. It's like, you literally cannot predict me because I don't know what I'm gonna do. Head empty, fists flying. Starting out with another longtime favorite of mine, Trapinch. It's focused on ground moves as you would expect of the Pokemon that is literally just Pokemon's version of an antlion. It has the same conical home trap, it also throws sand at prey that tries to escape, the whole shebang is here. Thanks to the angle of its trap, you're effectively guaranteed to die unless you can fight it with the disadvantage you've been given. As such, it makes sense that Fissure is its last move, as the earth splits open and swallows you whole in an instant KO move that only doesn't work if you are a higher level, or it misses, of course, basically saying you have to be stronger or just not fall into that trap. For Vibrava and Flygon, they close out with Boom Burst, which is best represented by the Desert Spirit Flygon, as through the singing sound it makes with its wings, it will attract and strand prey before attacking, giving those wings a strong enough flap, and those songs turn into deadly bursts of sound based on this finishing move. Cacnea closes with Sandstorm and Destiny Bond, which is horrifying, because while yes, we could say it's just because it gets stuck to things with the spikes on its body, this is actually its way of stalking you. It summons a Sandstorm and follows you. Your sight ruined by the horrible conditions. Visibility low. Hope running lower, all while it follows you from the shadows. You are not escaping it. Your life is already doomed. After all, it had to learn how to do this at some point, since that's its primary way to hunt in the form of Cacturn. The only difference is that Cacturn closes with Sandstorm, but does learn Cotton Spore right before that, almost as if to say it releases spores in a sandstorm to spread its kind throughout the desert. To no surprise, Altaria ends with Perish Song for all the singing that it does, and Godbird, or Sky Attack as you may call it. It definitely has ancient origins as a dragon type, but this one is a fast open and close explanation. Again, sound type video if you want all the other intricate details. Zangoose and Seviper are mortal enemies, so of course I want to talk about them together and how when they first debuted, their signature moves were Crush Claw and Poison Tail in that respective order. Zangoose tears at Seviper with Crush Claw so powerfully that it has a 50% chance of lowering its opponent's defense, while Poison Tail has a high crit ratio and a 10% chance of poisoning its foe. They have adapted these skills against each other, with Zangoose being immune to poison, causing Seviper to have to focus more on striking at Zangoose's weakest points with a critical attack rather than hoping to inflict poison. Solrock and Lunatone are strange. They both close with Explosion, but Lunatone has Stone Edge, Future Sight, and Magic Room, while Solrock has Stone Edge, Solar Beam, and Wonder Room. For Solrock, it definitely focuses on Enlightenment from the moon, leading into the psychic abilities in that way as well. You can even claim that since Magic Room suppresses held item effects, it releases its attachments to material objects and is then able to reach Enlightenment for greater power, only to then explode. Not sure if that's just because it was filled with too much power or what, honestly speaking. As for Solrock, Solar Beam is a no-duh. It's a sun after all. While Wonder Room just switches defense and special defense with each other, using its psychic power to effectively make up for the lower physical defense it has. I'm definitely missing something, I feel like, but I cannot put my finger on it with proper evidence. Like, it just feels like I'll start spinning my wheels trying to find an answer that makes sense, but again, there's no solid evidence that I can find for anything whatsoever beyond what I've said, so maybe one of you know and you can tell me, because something again feels incredibly weird here. Surprising nobody, Whiscash ends with Fissure, but there's something special here, because it gets Thrash on evolution, while Earthquake and Future Sight follow this Fissure. And this very directly relates to Catfish in the real world being observed to thrash about before an earthquake arrived. This could be seen as telling the future, as some myths stated, or them even causing earthquakes, as old myths would also say. But Catfish can just feel when an earthquake is on its way, as hinted at earlier. Meanwhile, Whiscash not only tells when one is on its way, but even quote-unquote causes them through all of its thrashing that causes tremors extending over a 3-mile radius. And despite having the move Earthquake, Dex entries consistently state that Whiscash really only caused tremors and not full-on earthquakes. Crawdaunt is Crab. It learns Guillotine. Real name of Guillotine is Pincer Guillotine. Crabs be out here crabbing it up with their crabby moves. I can feel myself going a little bit crazy, and I still have future generations to cover in other videos. Send help, please. Maybe in the form of channel memberships. While Claydol might finish with Sandstorm and Explosion, its move on evolution is more interesting as it gets Hyper Beam, which its primary way of attacking is through just shooting beams from its hands according to its Pokédex, so another easy explanation in the books here. Cradily, the Tunicate's Crinoid mix, puts that big ol' mouth to use through Stockpile, Spit Up, then it swallows again, only to spit something else out in the form of Energy Ball. Nothing surprising here, but hey, have this video of a predatory Tunicate eating, as it'll give you a solid visual of how Cradily eats as it dissolves prey with its tentacles. As we move on to our next fossil, it's official. Everything with claws like Parasect close out with X-Scissor, which is exactly what Armaldo ends on, so we're moving on already. Feebas, of course, only has Splash, Tackle, and Flail, but Melodic ends in Hydro Pump as expected of water Pokemon. Further than this though, prior to this, we get moves like Aqua Ring, Life Dew, Dragon Tail, Safeguard, Rain Dance, and Coil. These moves focus on the scales of Melodic, its serpentine nature, and how it is, by all technicality, a dragon, explaining not only why it gets Dragon Tail, but is also in the Dragon Egg group. The word dragon is derived from Drakon, meaning serpent or seeing one, whereas Latin Draco described a giant, often legless serpent of snake rather than the dragons we think of with big old wings. This is why we see so many serpentine Pokemon being included as part of the Dragon Egg group, which then ties into a much larger picture that I will not get into today. Weather Ball used to be the signature move of Cast Form, the most fitting move for a Pokemon that changes as the weather does and can then take full advantage of its changed form and the changed weather. Actually, I would dare say it takes better advantage with the attack, since it would even become a rock type, the move, if it was used during a sandstorm. Yet we haven't gotten a sandstorm version of Cast Form for whatever reason. Kecleon is a true chameleon, even though I've never heard of chameleons making loud sounds, as when Kecleon is found, it screeches, changes its typing and color through conversion 2, and then uses Power Whip to attack in the form of its super long tongue. Imagine scaring something only for it to turn invisible while screaming and lick you with powerful force. At least we can be happy that it's not going to try to eat us. It only likes bugs. First, Banette uses Trick, as it tricks you into believing it is a normal doll, and then it closes with Phantom Force as it disappears to scare you or attack you again in the future. Even before these moves, it gets things like Shadow Sneak and Hex, as it curses a target and sneaks up on them. But in order, it has Role Play and Sucker Punch, so it might just wait until you pick it up before it just sucker punches you unexpectedly like the jerk it is. Like, I get it. You were abandoned. Get in line with the rest of us with one parent. You don't need to go punching people, Banette. While Duskull and Dusclops close with Future Sight, Dusknoir adds Destiny Bond as its new closer, We are talking about the Grim Reaper Pokemon line here, which is pretty fitting considering the Harvest Man is more often seen as a demigod or one of many Harvest Men rather than a true god, as it serves the forces of life and death. As these Pokemon consume souls, you could make the joke that they know they will eventually become Dusk Noir, or at least life energy or whatever objects it really wants to, you name it. Being able to now, though, see the future of others and eventually reach them in their final moments. They bring the soul into their own mouths and carry you to the afterlife within them, thus the reasoning behind Destiny Bond. Tropius has nothing of note with Solar Beam, simply a classic for grass Pokemon and expected of a Pokemon whose body and long neck allows it to outcompete and stand higher than other plants and soak up more sunlight. Chingling closes with Uproar, as it is just a bell making a bunch of noise, while Chimecho actually ends with Heal Pulse. Its dex tells us everything we need there is, as its cries have a bright and refreshing tone that soothes the hearts of trainers who hear them. These cries calm the souls of listeners and are said to have a cleansing power that wards off malice and purifies evil spirits. Despite Absol being a warning of what's to come as the Omen Pokemon, it turns out that its final move, Perish Song, is another way to foretell the fate of death that is soon to come to someone unless they can escape. After all, you're given a warning that in 3 turns, your Pokemon will faint, but you can always switch out to avoid this fate, giving us Absol's warning call to anyone who would listen in the form of a move. The Snow Arts line all finish with Blizzard, about as stereotypical as you'd expect of them, but it's other moves that relate back to their behavior. For example, Snorunt learns Crunch beforehand since it just likes to eat ice, with Glalie being no different as it freezes prey then eats them as it loves an icy treat. Frostlass is slightly more standout as on evolution it does learn Hex, picking its male target to pursue as it haunts and eventually freezes them as its own prey. Then it just eats their souls, which are frozen, which is a whole weird thing. I think it can also freeze fire in its Mega form, if I remember correctly, which this Pokemon is just messing with nature and energy and the natural order altogether. While Rain's signature move used to be Ice Ball in reference to seals balancing balls on their nose, and even when we look at this line, we find that Spheal is treated like the ball that it is by Celio, as it will roll and balance Spheal on Celio's nose. Now, take this trick and turn it into a high velocity attack that acts like the ice version of Rollout, doubling in power for every consecutive hit, which is what this move does. It's effectively being rewarded for consistently putting out tricks in this way. Clamperl is nothing special, and it pains me whenever I get it in a Nuzlocke because of its move list. Don't get me wrong, it's a little cute, but it only has Water Gun, Whirlpool, and Iron Defense at level 1. And then it isn't until it reaches level 50 that it gets Shell Smash, which is likely because the eel egg in its mouth has had enough, evolves, and breaks Clamperl open. Why else do you think we see Gorbis with seashells on its chest as if it has boobs to cover up? As for Huntail and Gorbis, they do close with Aqua Tail, Coil, and Hydro Pump, exactly what you would expect of eels, although at least Gorbis gets Draining Kiss since it sucks blood out of prey for food, and Huntail gets Crunch because of those big old chompers it has. Relicanth not only has Head Smash, but because of its ability Rock Head, it faces no recoil damage whatsoever. This references real-life coelacanths who do have incredibly dense heads with a lot of bone mass in that face of theirs. It not only serves as armor effectively, but also allows them to bite with incredible force. After all, to output pressure, your body has to be able to withstand the same pressure at a minimum. I'm assuming that Love Disc closes with Safeguard, which is meant to be in protection of its relationship with other Love Disc. I mean, it does close with Safeguard, but this is my assumption. It's described as a mysterious power that prevents status problems, and when you think of love, you likely think of the classic marriage lines of in sickness and in health. Except Love Disc safeguard each other from getting sick in the first place, which, whew, God, that just made me think that a little over a year from now, I will be a married man. But no slowing down. As much as I would love to gush about that, we're getting close to that finish line. While the Salamence line all ends with life-risking tackle, it really isn't all that life-risking because Bagon and Shelgon at least have Rock Head as their ability. After all, it's the only way that Bagon can continually dive off of tall structures head first without dying. And of course, as it does this, all it's wishing is for the ability to fly, somehow then causing a change in its genetic structure to not only evolve eventually into Salamence, but to immediately learn fly upon evolution. Once again, I'm pretty sure no other Pokemon so far just learns fly naturally despite being able to fly, so this is pretty special. It also is kind of nice to know that no matter what, it seems like we won't see any Bagon dead from jumping from those heights. They don't even really have a neck, so they aren't going to be breaking that on impact anytime soon. While Beldum only has Tackle, because of course the creature who is just a head with a tube body can only have Tackle, Metang and Metagross finish with Hyper Beam. Sure, make the mech shoot laser beams, that's cool, but when we look at what their move reminder reminds them of, we get to see their hunting method in the form of their moves. Metang debilitating prey with confusion before sinking their metal claws into them. Meanwhile, Metagross will hone its claws to sharpen them, digging deeper with Metal Claw, and in the event that it's about to lose, it will use Explosion. Now, I'll admit, Explosion is more for Mega Metagross, but I fully believe there are other regular Metagross out there that refuse to lose and would rather end a match in a tie by going Big Boom. To my absolute surprise, the Reginald trio all end with Lock On, Zap Cannon, Hyper Beam, and Explosion. Moves that I have said are often closers for Pokemon created by humanity, but we know that, Regirock, Regice, Registeel, they were all created by Regigigas, so it has to be in reference to the fact that they were constructed to begin with. They even all learn Ancient Power early on to denote their ancient origins, of course, and the more I think about it, the more I really should have a video dedicated to Regigigas and the rest of the Regis. I've talked about them so much in other videos, but never as the primary focus, technically. The closest was the Lost Age of Giants, which I covered as part of Keyscam's writings, which was really fun. While Latias is the only Pokemon who can use Mist Ball, which is really just it throwing a ball of its soft feathers at you, there's a direct reference to the Two Heroes movie that they are in, which focuses on these Pokemon with their final moves. For as they try to protect Altomare, the only way to make sure everyone lives is for Latios to become the Soldew and restore order to the area. In this, we still see a weakened Latios, and despite Latias wanting Latios to recover, it still has to make this sacrifice. And so we find Latias with its last move being Healing Wish, while Latios' last move is Memento, the object it leaves behind as a memento, of course, being the Soldew. And that is just devastating. I wasn't expecting such a banger for these two as a final move, such a good reference, and I'm happy it was here. Any references to the movies or the manga puts a big ol' smile on my face. We're in the final few, thank God. I like covering these, but it's a little monotonous, and I hope I was able to, do it justice and not make it too monotonous for you. But Kyogre, being a whale, does end with Water Spout, as we saw with Wailord, but its signature move is Origin Pulse. Countless beams of not water, but light that are used to attack opponents. With water being the origin of all life, add in Pulse as if it were a heartbeat, and light being the beginning of the universe, first there was darkness and then there was light situation, of course, it all makes clear and easy sense. For Groudon, it ends with Solar Beam and Eruption. After all, it does summon Harsh Sunlight, commands Incredible Heat, and causes the eruption of lava anywhere it wants as it expands landmass. But its signature move is Precipice Blades, which are simply the manifestation of the land summoned in fearsome blades of stone as the move describes itself. The precipice of something is the edge or even overhang of a cliff, for example, a dangerous turning point. And as it creates land, it is always creating a new precipice, theoretically speaking, as it expands the edges of continents. The Atmosphere Dragon Rayquaza has a slew of moves that are constant reminders of its own power and anger when it has to get involved. It does naturally learn Fly, followed by Hurricane, Outrage, and the classic of Hyper Beam because you, Deoxys, take this point blank Hyper Beam. It is a Pokemon that not only stops Kyogre and Groudon, but creates ozone and protects the atmosphere, so of course it would have the ability to shift around weather so much that it could create hurricanes. It's the completion of water, land, and air. But as you know, it doesn't stop there, as it is the only Pokemon capable of knowing Dragon Ascent, or rather, Dragon Ascension, going beyond and into the next level as it converts Mega Energy with its Mikado organ to Mega Evolve. It simply soars into the sky, then dive bombs opponents, going into the atmosphere, then dropping at terminal velocity, I assume, which would explain why its own defense and special defense are lowered in the process of using this move. It just becomes a crashing meteor in the process. Despite every time I've talked about Jirachi, there's one thing that always throws me off, and it is Jirachi's signature move, Doom Desire. It says that Jirachi attacks with a bundle of light, which effectively works like Future Sight, and I've always imagined it using this move in conjunction with opening its third eye on its stomach. But we really don't get much information otherwise. Sure, it uses it in the manga and in the anime, with the anime showing a meteor shower being released from the explosion in the Wishmaker movie, as we watch the false Groudon get blasted, disintegrated even to nothingness, but still something feels off. To me, we can take this one of two ways. One is that someone, or even Jirachi itself, wished for their opponent's doom. And that's a bit horrifying to imagine a wish being used to kill someone. Alternatively, though, it could be an ironic meaning behind it, that excess wishes and greed will only bring about doom through desire. Either way, this move leaves me wanting more, as I can't find anything incredibly concrete. Maybe a Jirachi dedicated video will need to be released. It is in Lentil, and that region needs its lore video at some point. Deoxyribonucleic acid, the complete government name of Deoxys, our final Pokemon for today. Its different moves do have different finishers: Hyper Beam for normal and attack form, Mirror Coat for defense form, and Extreme Speed for its speed form. All common sense, I'd say. But the signature move of Deoxys is, of course, Psycho Boost. This allows Deoxys to attack its opponents with all of its power in one go, but the recoil causes Deoxys' special attack to sharply lower. In my eyes, I see this DNA Pokemon that was once a virus choosing to make one last gamble on an offensive strike, knowing that it will be okay eventually, whether it wins or loses. After all, it does have the ability to regenerate its entire body as long as its core is untouched. But with that, we have now covered generations 1 through 3, and I want to know, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments, as I love to learn from all of you as much as I like to try and teach and explain these hidden details. If you want to see Generation 4 and 5 soon, like the video. The more likes, the more I'm likely to make the next video sooner. In addition, hype the video, as that also helps appease the mighty algorithm alongside those comments. I also want to say thank you to the members of the channel, as you see on the screen right now. If you'd like to get behind the scenes info, early access to videos, and members exclusive videos, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It helps the channel immensely, and maybe I'll be able to, throw a little money towards an editor here and there, meaning even more videos for all of you. Lastly, one of the best comments from last week was from Strangest Blossom, who commented on the Pokemon Go rabbit hole, saying, "I remember when it launched. I was walking around town with my boyfriend and our friend playing it until 4 a.m. That's a really late time. I think I did that too, actually. Saw a hit-and-run car accident. The person who didn't run was fine, don't worry. The cops showed up, and the first thing they asked wasn't about the accident, but instead, you out here playing that Pokemon Go? Fun night!" I love that. It's so dumb. It's great. It just encapsulates everything, and I need to do more investigation videos and Pokemon in general. Those are so much fun, like with the Mystery of Alola's Dead Faller, and then digging into real-life stuff for Pokemon Go. But with that then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.